The smell of victory and cigarette smoke, April 26, 1945. Southern Germany, April 26, 1945. 11:47 a.m. A dusty olive drab packet staff car skids to a halt outside a half-ruined Baroque palace in the Bavarian countryside. The air is thick with lilac blossoms and the faint, unmistakable stench of death drifting from the concentration camp the Third Army just liberated 2 days earlier. The rear door flies open before the driver can even cue the engine. Out steps General George S. Patton Jr., pearl-handled revolvers gleaming, polished helmet liner tucked under one arm, face sunburned the color of raw beef. His boots hit the gravel like gunshots. Two nervous MPs snap to attention. Inside the palace, 12th Army Group headquarters hums with the quiet panic of men who know the war is almost over and nobody wants to be the last name on a casualty report. Patton strides past the sentries without breaking pace. His aide, Colonel Charles Codman, scrambles to keep up. "Sir, General Bradley's expecting you in the map room." "He can wait," Patton growls, voice like gravel soaked in bourbon. "I'm here to see the man himself, not his damn pins." Up the marble staircase, past shell-scarred cherubs and walls still dripping from yesterday's rain. Officers flatten against corridors as the old man storms through. You can almost taste the electricity. Every soldier knows Patton's temper is a loaded weapon with the safety permanently off. He reaches the heavy oak doors of Bradley's personal office. A young captain blocks the way, pale. "Sir, General Bradley is in conference." Patton's eyes narrow to slits. "Son, I crossed the Rhine with less resistance than this." The captain steps aside. The door bursts open. There stands Omar Nelson Bradley, pipe in mouth, sleeves rolled, bent over a situation map with Eisenhower's chief of staff, Bedell Smith. The room smells of coffee, ink, and the particular exhaustion that comes when you've been winning for 11 straight months. Bradley looks up, calm, almost gentle. "George, good to see you." "We were just..." Patton cuts him off with a voice that could shatter glass. "Brad, what the hell is this I hear about you pulling the 9th Army away from Simpson and giving it back to Monty?" The temperature in the room drops 10 degrees. Bedell Smith quietly edges toward the door. Bradley straightens, removes the pipe, and you can see the quiet steel behind those schoolteacher glasses. Patton doesn't wait for an answer. He steps closer, boots creaking, until the two 4-star generals are inches apart. One all fire and swagger, the other ice and restraint. "You re-gutting my army group on the eve of the final push because you re-scared of hurting Montgomery's feelings?" Patton's voice drips contempt. "I've got 3rd Army driving so fast the crowds think it's mechanized cavalry. And you're pulling the rug?" Bradley's reply is soft, almost sad. "George, this comes from Ike, not me." Patton's lip curls. "Ike's wrong. And you know it." A long beat. Outside, somewhere, an artillery piece thunders. Probably just training, but it feels like the war itself is listening. Then Patton does something no one in the room will ever forget. He turns on his heel, walks to the doorway and pauses, just long enough for every officer to see the disgust written across his face. "I came here as a friend, Brad," he says without looking back. "Next time, send a goddamn memorandum. I don't step inside the headquarters where my own army group commander won to fight for his men." He steps across the threshold and stops dead. On the wall, right beside the doorframe, someone has tacked up a new organizational chart. 3rd Army, 7th Army, and the newly returned 9th, all neatly boxed under a single red arrow pointing north, straight into the British 21st Army Group sector. Patton stares at it for 3 full seconds. Then, deliberately, he reaches up, rips the chart from the wall, crumples it in one fist, and lets it fall to the floor like trash. Without another word, he walks out. Boots echoing down the palace corridor like approaching doom. Bradley stands motionless, pipe forgotten, watching the empty doorway. You can almost hear the fracture forming. 2 old friends, 2 titans of the European theater, and the one moment where respect finally snapped. But what almost nobody knows yet is that Patton has just made a decision that will haunt Allied headquarters for the next 48 hours. He's not going back to his own command. Not yet. The refusal, a 4-star general goes. Missing April 26, 1945, 12:03 p.m. The Packard roars away from the palace so fast the rear tires spit gravel like machine gun fire. Colonel Codman clutches the door handle, white-knuckled. "Sir, where are we going?" Patton doesn't answer. He just stares straight ahead, jaw working like he's chewing bullets. The staff car blows past the 3rd Army checkpoint without slowing. The sentries see the 4 stars on the bumper and snap salutes so hard they nearly dislocate shoulders. 10 miles south, the driver finally risks another question. "General, shall I radio General Gay that you're returning to?" "No radios," Patton snaps. "Not a damn peep. Let them sweat." Codman exchanges a look with the driver. In 12 years of serving Patton, neither has ever seen him this cold, this quiet. Quiet is never good with George Patton. Quiet means the volcano is about to blow sideways. They drive for 40 minutes, past columns of Sherman tanks parked nose to tail like steel cattle past. G is who stop in their tracks and stare because Old Blood and Guts himself just went by with a face that could curdle milk. Finally, the Packard turns off the main road and climbs a narrow lane into the forests above the Danube. The driver thinks they're heading for the forward command post at Regensburg. They're not. The car stops in a clearing overlooking the river. Below, the water glints like hammered pewter under a weak spring sun. Smoke still rises from the ruins of a bridge 3rd Army knocked out yesterday. Patton climbs out, lights a cigar with shaking hands, and just stands there for 20 minutes, 30, an hour. Codman finally breaks the silence. "Sir, 12th Army Group is probably tearing the airwaves apart looking for you." Patton exhales smoke through his nose like a dragon. "Good." Another long silence. Somewhere downstream, a 155mm battery fires a registration round. "Whoa-HAM." The echo rolls across the valley like God clearing his throat. Then Patton speaks, so low Codman has to lean in. "You know what Bradley just did, Charlie? He let Montgomery piss on my leg and told me it was raining." Codman starts to answer, thinks better of it. Patton flicks the cigar into the dirt. "I've been fighting under that man since North Africa. Took orders, smiled when he took my gasoline at Messina. Swallowed it when he froze me out of the bulge. But this?" His voice cracks like a whip. "This is castration in front of the whole goddamn world." He turns, eyes burning. "From this moment forward, I will not set foot inside Omar Bradley's headquarters again. Not while this war lasts. Not if the building's on fire and he's the only man with water." Codman swallows. "Sir, that's going to cause a hell of a storm at Schaeff." Patton actually smiles, thin, vicious, terrifying. "Let I court-martial me. I'll take the rap if it means my soldiers know their commander still has a spine." He climbs back into the car. "Drive, Sergeant. Take me to the 4th Armored. I want to smell diesel and cordite. That's the only headquarters I recognize right now." As the Packard disappears down the forest road, a signal officer at 12th Army Group finally works up the courage to knock on Bradley's door. "Sir, we can't raise General Patton. His CP says he never checked in. Last sighting was his car leaving here at high speed. No radio contact for over 90 minutes. Bradley looks up slowly from the map. The pipe in his hand has gone cold. For the first time in the entire war, Omar Bradley, the GI's general, the man who never raises his voice, looks genuinely afraid. Because somewhere out there, a 4-star army with 400,000 men and 6,000 tanks has just lost its leash. And nobody knows where George Patton is going to point it next. The fracture becomes a chasm. Eisenhower's fury descends. April 26, 1945. 3:17 p.m. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, Versailles. The teletype in Eisenhower's outer office starts hammering like a rivet gun. The duty colonel rips the sheet off the platen, reads it once, and feels the blood drain from his face. Urgent eyes only from 12th Army Group. Patton departed this HQ 12:03 hours, no contact since believed en route 3rd Army, CP but not. Confirmed, requests immediate guidance. Eisenhower is in the war room when Bedell Smith finds him. The Supreme Commander is leaning over the big plexiglass map table, red grease pencil in hand, calmly redrawing boundaries that will end the Third Reich in days. Smith hands him the flimsy. Ike reads it. The pencil in his hand stops moving. Then very quietly, "That son of a bitch?" The room goes dead. Even the WAC plotters freeze. Eisenhower's voice climbs exactly one octave, which for anyone who knows him is the equivalent of a full nuclear detonation. "Get Bradley on the secure line now." 2 minutes later, the scrambler phone is patched through. Bradley's voice comes over tinny and tired. "Ike, before you say anything, I tried to calm him down." "Calm him down?" Eisenhower's Kansas drawl turns razor sharp. "Omar, one of my army group commanders just went rogue because you two can behave like grown men for 5 goddamn minutes." Bradley tries to explain. The 9th Army transfer, Montgomery's supply priorities, the political necessity. Eisenhower cuts him off. "I don't care if Montgomery needs the 9th to polish his ego. Find Patton. Drag him back by the scruff if you have to. Because if he starts freelancing across the Elbe, Stalin will have every excuse he needs to keep half of Europe." Click, line goes dead. Back in Bavaria, the sun is bleeding out across the Danube when Patton finally rolls into the forward echelon of 3rd Army near Deggendorf. The guards see the 4-star plate and nearly drop their rifles. Major General Hugh Gaffey, acting commander in Patton's absence, comes running out of the command tent barefoot, still in shirt sleeves. "Jesus Christ, sir. Where the hell have you been?" If burning the wires down. Patton claps him on both shoulders, grinning like a wolf. "Hugh, my boy, I have just declared independence. From now on, we take orders from God and the pursuing enemy. Nobody else." Gaffey blanches. "Sir, Eisenhower is going to have your stars for this." Patton's grin widens. "Then he'll have to come down here and pry them off my dead body." Inside the command tent, Patton rips open a fresh map, slams it on the table. His finger stabs Czechoslovakia. "Gentlemen, while the politicians argue about whose feelings are hurt, there are 100,000 American boys still in POW cages east of Pilsen. The Krauts are collapsing faster than a Berlin cat house at closing time. We are going to go get our people." A hush falls. Every officer in the tent knows that crossing into the agreed Soviet zone without permission is career suicide. Patton looks around the ring of faces he has bled with from Morocco to here. Any man who wants to sit this one out can transfer to the Quartermaster Corps right now. The rest of you, saddle up. Not a single officer moves. At that exact moment, 400 miles away in Versailles, Eisenhower is dictating the most furious message of the European war. To Commanding General, 3rd Army from Supreme Commander, you will establish immediate radio contact and report your intentions. You are hereby directed not to advance east of the Karlovy Vary Pilsen H. Budjovic line. Acknowledge receipt by 2,200 hours or face relief. The message goes out in the clear because Patton's own signal section has mysteriously gone deaf for the last 4 hours. Night falls. Somewhere on the darkening roads of Western Bohemia, spearheads of the 4th and 11th Armored Divisions are already rolling east. Guidance flapping, turrets traverse rearward in case someone tries to stop them. And George Patton is riding in an open jeep at the front, scarf snapping in the wind, eyes fixed on the horizon where the first faint glow of liberation is waiting. He has just drawn the clearest line of his life, between the war he was ordered to fight and the war he intends to finish his way. The night the wires burned, he's doing it anyway. April 26, 1945. 9:58 p.m., 3rd Army Forward Command Post, a freezing schoolhouse outside the village of Zwiesel, Bavaria. The kerosene lamps hiss. Every radio set in the building is tuned to the 12th Army Group Command Net, volume low, speakers crackling with panic. A lieutenant tears the latest flimsy off the teleprinter and sprints to the map room. Hobart Gay, Patton's chief of staff, normally unflappable, reads it under the green-shaded lamp and actually whispers, "Mother of God." The message is short, brutal. Immediate relief from command ordered if nitrogen monoxide acknowledgement. By 2,200 hours, Eisenhower 2 minutes to deadline. Every officer in the room turns toward the doorway, where Patton stands silhouetted, cleaning his fingernails with a captured Luftwaffe dagger. He doesn't even look up. "Sir," Gay says, voice cracking, "that's the Supreme Commander himself. He'll do it." He relieved his best friend on Sicily for less. Patton snaps the blade shut, slides it into his boot. "Hobby," he says softly. "Do you know what tonight is?" He blinks. "No, sir. Tonight is the first night since 1942 that finally fighting the war the way it should have been fought from the beginning." He steps to the big wall map, picks up a grease pencil, and with one calm stroke, draws a red arrow straight across the agreed halt line into the heart of Czechoslovakia. Then he turns to the signal officer, a terrified captain from Kansas. "Son, send this to General Eisenhower." Exact words, he dictates slowly, deliberately, like a man dictating his own legend. To Supreme Commander, from Patton, message received. "My intentions are to liberate American prisoners and Czech civilians currently under Nazi control. Will comply with cessation of offensive operations when those tasks are complete or when personally relieved by you. Respectfully, G.S. Patton Jr." The captain's fingers freeze over the key. Patton leans in until their noses almost touch. "Send it, Captain. History doesn't wait for cowards." Click dash click dash click. The Morse leaps into the night. In Versailles, Eisenhower receives the reply at 22:14. He reads it once, twice. Then he does something no one in the room has ever seen. He puts his head in his hands for a full 10 seconds. When he looks up, his eyes are bloodshot. "Get me Marshall," he says quietly. "And somebody find Bradley. Tell him his old classmate just declared war on the entire post-war world. Midnight. On the dark roads east of the Bohemian forest, American columns roll without headlights. Tank engines thunder like moving earthquakes. Infantrymen ride the decks, cigarettes glowing like fireflies. Up front, in the lead jeep, Patton stands upright, one hand on the windshield, scarf whipping behind him like a battle standard. A staff sergeant riding shotgun risks a question into the wind. "Sir, what happens if Ike really relieves you tomorrow?" Patton laughs, actually laughs, into the cold night air. "Then tomorrow the Third Army will be commanded by the best damn major general in this theater. But tonight..." He sweeps an arm toward the blacked-out horizon where faint orange glows mark burning. German convoys already fleeing his advance. "Tonight, Sergeant, the Third Army belongs to its soldiers. Behind them..." The schoolhouse radio crackles one last time before the operators pull the plugs. A single fragmented message leaks through from 12th Army Group. "Repeat, stand down. For God's sake, George." Static swallows the rest. The wires go dead. And somewhere east of Pilsen, the first American tank crashes through a roadside barrier marked in faded paint. Achtung. Demarcation line. Soviet zone. The driver never even slows down. Because the old man is up there in the dark, riding point like some avenging cavalry ghost from 1863, and every man in the column knows one thing with iron certainty. Tonight nobody, not Bradley, not Eisenhower, not even the combined weight of the United States Army, is going to stop George Patton from doing what he came to Europe to do. The question hanging in the freezing air now isn't whether Patton will be relieved. It's whether anyone on God's green earth has the guts to try. Dawn at the gates of hell. May 6, 1945. Outside Pilsen, May 6, 1945. 4:51 a.m. Western Czechoslovakia. 10 days have passed since Patton vanished into the forest. The leading Sherman of Combat Command B, 4th Armored Division, breaks through a thin screen of Hitler Youth with anti-tank grenades and rolls into the outskirts of Pilsen at first light. The city is already burning in places, SS rearguards torching their own POWs. The air tastes of coal smoke, pine, and something worse drifting from the east. Patton is there. He has not slept in a bed for a week. His eyes are red slits in a mask of road, dust, and exhaustion. But when the first Czech civilians run into the street waving homemade American flags, something in his face cracks open like sunrise. An old woman in a headscarf grabs his hand and kisses it, sobbing in a language he doesn't speak. "Patton, the man who once told his troops, 'I want you to remember that no bastard ever won a war by dying for his country. He won it by making the other poor. Dumb bastard die for his. stands, frozen tears cutting channels through the grime on his cheeks. Behind him, his tanks keep rolling. They have covered 120 miles in 9 days, completely off the map Eisenhower drew. Soviet liaison officers sent to coordinate have been politely but firmly left behind at every river crossing. Now the real objective appears. 12 miles southeast of Pilsen, hidden in a shallow valley the Germans thought was safe, sits Stalag 13B. 43,000 American prisoners, men captured in the Bulge in the air war, some since 1942, are packed behind barbed wire so thick it looks like steel wool. They are skeletons in rags. Many can no longer walk. When the first M5 light tank smashes the main gate at 6:22, the sound that rises from the compound is not cheering. It is a low animal moan of disbelief, 43,000 voices realizing the nightmare is actually over. Patton walks through the gate alone. He refused an escort. His driver begged. His staff threatened to resign. He told them all to go to hell. Now he stands in the middle of the camp street while former prisoners, men who once weighed 180 pounds and now weigh 90, stagger toward him like pilgrims. One of them a staff sergeant from the 28th Infantry Division with a black patch over where his left eye used to be, drops to his knees in the dirt and tries to salute with a hand that has no fingers left. Patton holds him up by the armpits, voice breaking. "Stand up, soldier, stand up. You never kneel to any son of a bitch again as long as you live." He turns in a slow circle, taking in the rows of walking corpses, the open graves the guards were digging when the first tanks appeared, the pile of bodies too far gone even for the crematorium. Then George Patton does the one thing no newsreel will ever capture and no official history will ever print. He takes off his 4-star helmet, sets it in the dust, and cries like a child. A Signal Corps photographer raises his camera. Patton sees the movement, whirls, and with a look that could melt steel snarls. "If one frame of that film sees daylight, I'll have you court-martialed until you're older than Methuselah." The camera comes down. By noon, the camp is emptying. Every truck, half-track, and ambulance in 3rd Army is converging. Medics are triaging men too weak to survive another day without plasma. Chaplains are giving general absolution because there isn't time for individual confessions. And still the tanks roll deeper into Czechoslovakia, toward Prague, toward whatever is left. At 14:10, a Soviet liaison colonel finally catches up, driving a jeep flying a red flag and screaming in broken English for the Americans to halt. Patton meets him in the middle of a wheat field outside the village of Rocky Caney. The Russian is furious, waving a map with the agreed halt lines circled in red. Patton listens for 30 seconds, then cuts him off. "Colonel, you tell Marshal Karnev that my soldiers did not come 3,000 miles to stop 50 kilometers short of men who've been waiting 5 years to be free." The Russian sputters something about international agreements. Patton leans in until their foreheads almost touch. "Son, the only agreement I recognize right now is the one I just made with 43,000 American ghosts back there. The rest is politics." He climbs back into his jeep and is gone before the Russian can finish his sentence. By nightfall, 3rd Army spearheads are 20 miles from the suburbs of Prague. And in a quiet room in Versailles, Dwight Eisenhower sits alone with a glass of scotch he doesn't drink, staring at a single sheet of paper that just arrived by courier from the combined chiefs. It is a direct order from President Truman. Permit General Patton to continue operations until all American prisoners are recovered or until German armed resistance in his sector ceases. Political considerations secondary. Eisenhower sets the paper down, rubs his temples, and mutters the sentence that will never make it into his memoirs. "God help me. I think the crazy bastard just saved us from ourselves." Somewhere east of the Vltava River, George Patton stands on the turret of a tank, watching Prague burn in the distance under a sky full of stars he finally feels tall enough to touch. He lights a cigar with steady hands now. The war is almost over. But for the first time in 3 years, George Patton is exactly where he was always meant to be. The silence after the guns, May 8, 1945, and what came next, May 8, 1945, 0:17 a.m., a farmhouse outside the village of Hastamis, 30 kilometers southwest of Prague. The guns have finally gone quiet. Patton sits alone on an overturned ammunition crate in the courtyard, helmet between his boots, a bottle of captured cognac untouched beside him. Every tank engine for 50 miles is cold. The only sound is the wind moving through the apple blossoms and the distant, ragged cheering of Czech partisans who still can't believe the Americans came. Inside the farmhouse, a Signal Corps radio operator steps out onto the porch, pale as milk. "Sir, it's official. Hostilities cease at 2301 hours. The 8th of May, the Germans have surrendered unconditionally." It's over. Patton doesn't move for a long time. Then he picks up the bottle, pulls the cork with his teeth, and pours a long stream onto the ground. Never takes a drink. "That's for the ones who didn't get to hear it," he says to no one. At 8 o'clock the next morning, a single olive drab sedan flying the 4-star plate rolls slowly back across the old Halt line, westbound this time. No escort, no press. Just Patton, Codman, and a driver who hasn't slept in 3 days. They pass the road signs pointing to Pilsen, to Regensburg, to the palace where Bradley still waits. Patton stares straight ahead, face unreadable. Codman finally breaks the silence. "Sir, are you going to 12th Army Group?" Patton lights a cigar, rolls the window down, lets the spring air hit his face. "No, Charlie, I'm going to my army. Then I'm going home." The car never stops at Bradley's headquarters. It never slows down. 2 days later, in a quiet ceremony at 3rd Army's final command post, Patton pins the Distinguished Service Cross on 16 soldiers who carried dying Poles on their backs for miles. When it's over, he steps to the microphone everyone expects him to use for a victory speech. Instead, he says only 12 words. "I have no further orders. You men won this war yourselves." Then he walks off the platform, gets into a jeep, and disappears toward the rear before anyone realizes he is crying again. Omar Bradley never receives an apology. He never asks for one. Years later, when historians come knocking, Bradley will only say this softly, almost to himself. "George was wrong about a lot of things, but that week in May, he was the only one of us who was right." Patton sails for home in June, 1945. The newspapers call him the hero of the last offensive. The State Department quietly buries every diplomatic note the Soviets filed about the unauthorized liberation of Prague approaches. Eisenhower greets him at the dock in New York with a handshake that lasts 2 full seconds longer than protocol requires. No courts-martial, no reprimands. Just a final, unspoken understanding between 3 old soldiers who know the real war sometimes ends a few days after the shooting stops. George S. Patton Jr. dies 7 months later in a car accident outside Mannheim. A cruel, stupid epilogue no one saw coming. At his funeral, the eulogy is delivered by a man who has not spoken to the press in years. Omar Bradley stands at the grave in the snow at Luxembourg American Cemetery and says, voice steady, "He was never tame." Thank God he was never tame. And somewhere, if you stand very still on a quiet spring night in Western Bohemia, old men will still tell you that on the evening of May 7, 1945, when the tanks finally stopped, you could hear a single American voice carrying across the fields, singing, of all things, the West Point alma mater at the top of his lungs, like a man who had just remembered he was still alive. The war ended the next day. But for one brief, furious week in the spring of 1945, George Patton refused to let it end until every last one of his boys was free. And because he did, 43,000 American ghosts got to go home and become grandfathers. That is why, to this day, in certain villages east of Pilsen, when an old man raises a glass on the 8th of May, he doesn't say, "to victory." He says very quietly, "to the crazy bastard who came anyway."